Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the West Georgia GAWL podcast, also known as She's Got GAWL. We are so excited to start the year off with our lessons learned from women leaders or from women who lead. And we're very, very honored tonight because we have a very special guest with us who, once I say the name, a lot of you will recognize. And then if I start to mention her attributes, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's her. But I think I do need to be a little bit formal and read her bio. And then we'll just dive right in. What we want to do is start the year off strong, start the year off with information that we can use. And when we were kind of asking folks, what do y'all want? What do y'all need? They were like, we need help with our careers. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, let's just talk to the folks who've been where we're trying to go. And see how we get there. And so tonight we're honored to have District Attorney Dalia Racine join us. She is the District Attorney of Douglas County here in Georgia. And she's lived in Douglas County for over 13 years with her husband, who is a Douglas County educator, and their 3 children. Dalia brings almost 15 years of prosecutorial experience to serve the community. And she specialized in anything from homicides to crimes against women and children and human trafficking. Dalia has also served as an attorney advisor with Equitas, where she provided training and technical assistance around gender-based violence investigations and prosecutions to prosecutors. She also trained law enforcement and allied professionals across the country. So when I say we're glad she's here, this is who we need to be trying to learn from, y'all. Dalia has championed the responsibility of elected prosecutors to keep their communities safe by implementing innovative practices and policies that reduce the number of repeat offenders who cause harm. And Dalia has integrated smart justice while holding dangerous offenders accountable in our prison system. Additionally, Dalia has made it a priority for the District Attorney's Office to be an integral part of our community and to keep servant leadership at the forefront of everything they do. Welcome, District Attorney Racine. Yay.
Hey, Ebony, thank you so much for this opportunity. So excited to chat with you tonight.
I am thrilled that you're here. And I want to take just a brief moment of personal privilege. And I have to say, thank you for answering the call to be a servant leader. And for those who may not have heard, Dalia is the first female district attorney in Douglas County, Georgia, and certainly the first woman of color to hold that role. So when I say trailblazer, this is the type of woman you want to be following and modeling after. And we're very, very thrilled about that. I thought we would start with something like rather basic though. What is leadership like to you? Like if somebody were to ask you to define, like we're talking about lessons learned from, women who lead, but what really is leadership?
Yeah, I disagree, Ebony. I don't think that's an easy question to answer first, but more than happy to answer it. For me, leadership starts first off with listening. You have to really have an opportunity to listen and understand the situation that you want to change. And then you have to know why you want to change it. What is your moral compass, your ethical compass? Why do you want to get involved? Because I think that those are 2 very important factors to decide what you want to do in leading and how you want to lead. And so for me, again, first step is listening, understanding what's going on, understanding what the problem is, and then taking it from an approach of being, again, morally, ethically focused to finding the best result possible when it comes to determining how you want to lead. And the biggest part, I think, for me of leading is empowering others to do the work that there is. If you are siloing yourself and you are the only authority and you're the only voice, oftentimes, number one, it could be over cumbersome. And then number 2, you lose a lot of perspective. You lose a lot of opportunity to think outside the box, think outside your own fishbowl. And so it's just really empowering talented people around you to get motivated and to support that cause and to support that purpose and finding that common purpose. That to me is what leadership is.
So you hit on something when you were talking about empowering others.
Mm-hmm.
What is your particular leadership style? Like if you had to define it, I know there's like tons of books that have been written about be this kind of leader, be that kind of leader. But I think as we evolve and lead more groups of people and different kinds of groups of people, you kind of mold into your own way of doing it. What would you say your leadership style is?
Yeah, I think so. To cheat a little bit, it's definitely something that's incorporated even within my bio. I am a strong believer in servant leadership. I think that if at your core you are doing this for the benefit of others, that there is really a great motivator, and it can take extract kind of some of that selfish motivation from what you're doing, and just kind of having the opportunity to step back and see what's the corporate good, what is it, the why, what is the purpose of what we're doing. And so I would definitely say that servant leadership, meaning serving your community, serving those that you want to lead, in addition to those that they serve. And so that for me is one of the biggest visions that I have for my leadership style. I think you also have to acknowledge that we're all imperfect. Folks will always hear me say that I have no ownership over great ideas. And so I'm constantly asking for people's thoughts. I had an opportunity to take a leadership skills assessment, and my number one attribute was input. Because I really feel like sound decisions come from hearing different perspectives, from hearing different angles, and then attacking the issue with that information. And so when you're serving people, I think that you don't ever want to fall into the trap of kind of a savior complex, like you have the answer for people. You really want to listen to what folks are saying, listen to what the issues are, listen to what the problems are. So that's what you address, given all this different perspective that you then feed into it, and pushing that forward. And being humble enough to understand that sometimes you got to pivot and you got to readjust, and what you thought was working maybe is not working the way that you thought it would. And you just need to be humble enough to accept that maybe that wasn't the best idea. You just got to fix it and do something a little different.
It's funny you should say that about the input piece, because I heard somebody say once, a leader that doesn't listen will find themselves surrounded by people who have nothing to say. So it's almost
I need to write that down, Ebony, later. That's really good.
And it came to my mind as you were speaking. And that leads me to another question though, because I think the higher up you go, sometimes people don't know how to necessarily express in a way, right? So if we're trying to be better leaders, if we're trying to be better lawyers, or committee chairpersons, or whatever it is we're doing, recognizing that sometimes people are not going to go to an elected or a director and say, you really messed that up, or that didn't really resonate.
Sometimes they do, Ebony.
Yeah. and sometimes they do. Or that didn't really resonate with the group. How can we measure our impact as leaders? Like, how will we know? Like, if we are getting input from people and we are listening and we are being servant leaders and we are trying at our core to be the best version of what we know to be the right thing, how will we know when we get it right?
Yeah, great question. I think that it's really important within leadership that you breed a culture of communication, and transparent communication, honest communication. And that does not happen overnight. I have the opportunity to come into office January 2021 and had never worked in the Douglas County District Attorney's Office prior to that date. And in fact, oftentimes individuals perhaps were instructed not to speak to me in the past, but neither here nor there. What it was that I walked into an office where people did not know me, and people heard about me, but not a lot of people knew me. And so I had to understand that, it's human nature. It's not a Dalia thing. It's not any individual person. It's human nature that you're kind of leery of what you don't know. So the first step, I think, is really about being transparent yourself, being communicative, explaining your why and what you want to do. And then also, I think that it's not lip service when you tell people, I want to hear your feedback, that you actually listen and you respond and you react. But all of these are really like, yay, this is like the utopic scenario, and that's how, and everything goes perfect. And that's not necessarily obviously how it unfolds. Right. So for our office, one thing that we did is we started like an anonymous comment box so that people could give a voice and have a voice without having to do what some may perceive as intimidating, going to top levels, executive level staff. So we made sure that we had that as a vessel. We also tried to in our communication, celebrate the wins. And you don't, a lot of times, so for those that are familiar with prosecutors' offices, sometimes you celebrate, when celebrate's not the right word, but recognize when a conviction has been obtained or some major milestone or some culmination of a ton of work. Mm-hmm. And what we recognize too is that recognition of those micro movements, of those micro successes, was just as important as those major milestones. Because when you're trying to affirm communication, you're trying to affirm your messaging, and people are getting it right on those everyday levels, you mm-hmm. have to celebrate that. You have to recognize that. And that then helps the communication to broaden, to be like, oh, okay, so this is what they were talking about. Let me feel more free to open. And I think also communication by proxy is huge. There's certain people that they feel, well, they have accessibility to so-and-so, so I'll tell them to tell this person. And so for a while, you get some of those anonymous comments, but it's to the point now where I always have an open door policy. And so it's to the point now where, any member of my team knows that if there's something they need to address, something they need to talk about, that they can communicate that to me. Now, I will caveat that because, our office is pretty large. We have almost 50 folks total. And so if you just had your door open all day, every day, then right. You wouldn't get much else done if there were a lot of issues and people just came streaming in. And so what we did do was establish kind of a chain of command so that you can understand if it doesn't get solved at this level, then you go to this level. And if it doesn't get solved at this mm-hmm. level, then you can come let the other person know. And so there's something systematic in place to try to resolve issues and having that communication, but understanding if ultimately you feel like you're not being heard or the issue's not being resolved, you have a remedy to come directly to me to speak about that. So I think that was very important as part of our leadership policy and protocol and methodology for the office.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that people respond to titles or people respond better to messaging, or is it a combination thereof? Like, I know some people say, well, I'm the VP of marketing, and because I'm the VP, you will do as I say, or you will execute my vision, or you will, give it 110%. And then some people say, well, I don't really care about the title. Mm-hmm. I need you to do X and Y and Z. And I don't know if you've encountered a situation or situations, particularly in your newest role, where people respond better because they know you're the district attorney, or they respond because they are in line with your vision, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's very individual. I think that it's just as independent as each person is that you encounter, what drives people, what motivates people. And so to speak to kind of what allows them to come and speak and open up, to me, I think just varies depending on the individual that has that concern or has whatever message that they want to, or communication that they want to get to me. But I will say that is kind of circling back to that leadership piece, is that we were very intentional to figure out what motivates each and every one of our team members. Because very similar to what you were saying, I think brings up a phenomenal point of like, every person's motivated by something different. Every person's driven by something different. And so in figuring out what that was for individuals, when it comes to our communication style back to our team members, that's something that was very important for us to capture when we were utilizing our communication tools to know, okay, this person appreciates praise, this person appreciates recognition, this person appreciates being left alone. And so sometimes when we start to mirror what they want, then they reciprocate in their own style as far as reaching back out with their communication to us. And so that I found, because it's so individualized as to people's approach, that that was helpful in how we dealt with that.
Do you have any advice for people who are probably not where they want to be in their careers, but they have aspirations to go higher, to move further? And this is a very general question, like just somebody who says, you know what, where I am right now is not where I want to be 5 years from now. And not only is it not where I want to be, but I want to hold a position of higher esteem, or, what society would regard as a higher position. Just any advice?
Yeah, so I think that this circles back to kind of what I was saying initially, which is, what's your why? Is it that you just want the title? Do you think that's going to bring you, more satisfaction from career-wise? Why did you get into this profession? What is it when you applied to law school that drove you to decide that this is what you wanted to do with your life? And I think that if you have that why, then that can drive you to do what is next and to explore and to expand your possibilities. Oftentimes we're so, I've said this word before, but it's like we're so siloed in our vision of what we could do with our law degree. But all of us, if we think about friends who've really broadened their horizons and opportunities, because having a law degree sure allows you to work within the legal field, but I mean, the possibilities are limitless as to what you can do with a law degree. And so figuring out your why, making sure that you're breaking through your own kind of self-inflicted definitions and constraints and ceilings that you put on yourself. I think that's a huge step. I happen to be reading right now Grit by Angela. Is it Duckworth? I think that's who the author is. I hate to misquote it, but I believe that's who it is. And it's really interesting to your point, Ebony, a lot of what you're talking about is like what motivates people to push, what motivates people to strive. And the chapter I'm ironically in right now is talking about purpose. That purpose is a big driving factor. And I think that sometimes when we focus on the what, right? Maybe it's like, well, I want to buy nicer clothes. I want to live in a nicer house. I want to travel more. I want to do these things. Those are all what's. But I think when we can really sit down with self-inflection and self-reflection, which is really hard for us to do, especially as women, to just sit and be with ourselves and to understand ourselves. But if we really drill down to the why, I think that can just blow the hinges off of the possibilities of where you could go and where you could take yourself and understand what that looks like. And maybe it's not up, maybe it's out. Maybe that's where you're.
That's
where you
deep. Maybe it's not up, it's out. That's so deep. I'm writing that. I'm happy in my current,
I was like, Ebony, please don't go out.
I'm
though.
thrilled.
Not you.
Like I have the best job in the office that I work in right now. I have the worst schedule, but I got the best job, so I'll take it. But I was gonna also ask, like, how is it getting people to follow you? You know what I mean? Like, because you can do a PowerPoint and you can send out a memo. These are the objectives. This is the long range plan. This is and it makes all perfect sense because you're the drafter of it and you know exactly what the end game is.
Right.
But how do you get 50 people there?
Yeah, great question, Ebony. So like, that was a huge lesson learned. I was like, here's the idea I have, y'all. I'm gonna roll it out. Let's do this. And it was, a lot of slow movement, and it did not necessarily flow in the way that I thought it would, could, all these different things. And I had to stop and be like, what is happening? Why? Like, to me, this makes perfect sense. Why is it that everybody's not just buying in and we're just doing this? And again, those humble moments, those moments of humility that you have to have in leadership of, I don't own great ideas. And so what we did is we stopped a lot of our policy rollouts and we started to have group meetings. And we said, hey guys, here's what the issue is that we want to tackle. Here's the idea that we have, because you don't want to just be like, have no purpose in the meeting.
Right.
But we would say, here's what the idea is, tell us what your thoughts are. Do you think this would work? Where can we improve it? Where can we improve it? Where do we need to eliminate things? Like, give us your ideas as to how we can make this work to accomplish what we are trying to accomplish. And from those meetings, we noticed that we streamlined processes. We had a lot more productive meetings. We had a lot more beneficial byproducts from those meetings. And I think it boils down to that people were invested. They had a voice, they had an opportunity to give input. And so therefore they were invested in the outcome. And then the same thing, like I was talking about before, we might roll out a project on something as mundane as discovery, right? Something that we all got to do. And it's, the trudge work of litigation.
Right.
And so, but when we got the paralegals to the table and we got the attorneys to the table and we started to discuss, this is the why, this is the how, this is, what do you guys think? Still being able to say, okay, guys, well, what we thought was going to work with everybody's investment, we can see now because we're getting the feedback, because we've opened the channels of communication, we need to readjust. So let's readjust. and being able to pivot. And always at the core of, I think, motivating people for change is helping them to understand the why before the what. And so that's what's really important, I think, in us getting folks to follow, and not just to follow, to again, invest and to give that feedback and to just really feel like they are a part of that process versus just being mandated and told what to do.
So I have had the opportunity to work for somebody who rolled out something. Mm-hmm. It was a disaster. Mm-hmm. And even though it was a disaster, they would never acknowledge that it was a disaster. Mm. They would never come to the team and say, hey, do you guys have any idea of why this didn't work? And they would never say, I know that you guys worked your tails off trying to do it the way that I rolled it out. I appreciate that. And it didn't work. How important is it for a leader to be able to not only pivot, as you say, but to acknowledge that they're not perfect, right? Like, because I can imagine, and my finger's pointing back at myself too, that, you know, it was a great idea in my head, right? But not only am I not, as I like how you said, the owner of all the great ideas, but also because I'm not executing every part of it, there are things that I haven't even considered necessarily that could make it go wrong. Yeah. What kind of self-talk or self-discipline or whatever skill it is, do you have to be able to be like, yeah, that was a disaster. Yeah. But thank y'all for trying, because I asked y'all to. Yeah. Right. I mean, are you that person? And if you are, were you always that person? Is that somewhere you're trying to get to? Do you think that's helpful or meaningful in a leadership role?
Strive to be. I think, again, being those imperfect people, human nature is, I think, very typical that you're like, you try to resist the fact that you've done wrong, right? You just try to be like, well, maybe, you find the excuses, but ultimately I think the ability to accept and hold yourself accountable allows you to have that trust and credibility when you hold others accountable. If I don't hold myself accountable first, then how can I expect anything from anybody else? And that circles back to that servant leadership. First and foremost, all of their bad decisions, regardless of who made them, falls on my shoulders. And so if we don't have that communication and those lines open, then we're just not going to be in a position where we can acknowledge what the flaws are. And ultimately, if the purpose of this is not to glorify Dalia, but to serve our community, then I need to understand when I've been wrong. I need to understand where maybe something I decided unintentionally harmed the work that we're trying to do. And it's a broader acknowledgement, again, of being purpose-driven in what you're doing and understanding that, you can't be selfish to think it's about you. Yeah, you might have made the wrong decision, but ultimately you need to apologize or hold yourself accountable because of the greater harm it caused. So, for example, for those that are in positions of leadership or strive to be in leadership, I could tell you nothing like coming into a new administration in the middle of a pandemic with an epic shortage of legal staff across the prosecution world, not just, here in Douglas County or Metro Atlanta or the state of Georgia, but literally across the country, suffering from people who are like, that whole, like, not up, but out. There's a lot of outs happening right now. But having to sit there and you're constantly, triaging. And sometimes when you're triaging, mistakes can be made. Sometimes, you have unintended damages and unintended consequences from things that you didn't see when you first integrated those ideas. And being able to step back. I've had my paralegals who are like, Dalia, guess when you said this is what happened. And this is what I had to do because of this policy and because this loophole was missed. And I had to step up, but I just felt like that was really unfair. Number one, I have to look at that as a huge accomplishment. And I celebrate that because that person felt comfortable enough with telling me something based off of what they saw was not serving our community, was not serving the purpose of our office. And they obviously had to suffer because of that. But to me, I was like, Number one, I am so sorry that that happened. Number two, thank you so much for telling me. And number three, let's fix it.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what it comes down to, because you got to keep the machine moving,
Yeah.
and you've got to keep the purpose going, and you've got to continually serve. And it does not work unless everybody's on that same accord, singing different notes, but we're all kind of on that same page.
Yeah. Can't whistle a symphony. It takes an orchestra to do that.
Indeed.
So we're going to wrap in the next couple minutes, but I wanted to just pick your brain a little bit more before we close. Because I know that there are different, like you said, motivations for folks who want to be up or out or whatever it is. Is there any type of, you mentioned one book, but folks always want to know what the great leaders are reading or what they would recommend reading, any workshop they would recommend, just to hone their leadership skills. Because I think what happens to people is that it looks easy to lead until you're the leader, right? Yeah. It looks like, and if you're fortunate, and I have been fortunate to have a great leader, the easier it looks, right? I tell people all the time, the better parents you have, the easier you think it is to parent until you get your own kids, right? Great parents just make it seem so effortless.
Right.
And I think it's the same way with great leaders. And so we discover along the way, like, this is hard. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. This is hard. Yeah. So what do you think about, like, any kind of recommended readings or workshops or webinars that you can suggest to our listeners?
Yeah, so I have to be, in being transparent, I have not done nearly as much reading as I would have liked to, especially in the last year.
You're busy.
But I mean, a couple of the ones that I have enjoyed reading, obviously, I'm in the middle of Grit, which I think is very interesting. There was another one, which again is something that I think for individuals to kind of push through those self-imposed constraints or societal constraints is, pardon the language, but The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F. I like that book as well. As far as like leadership styles, so just PAC does a really great leadership conference, the Prosecuting Attorneys Council for the prosecutors that might be listening. Any kind of discipline within the DA's office can attend. Any folks that are, I think you have to get co-signed by leadership or something along those lines. So I found that to be extremely motivating and helpful for, leadership styles and understanding how to lead. But I think ultimately it takes knowing yourself and that self-reflection and whatever that takes for you to do to again, and I sound like a broken record, I understand, but I just feel like for me, it's been so important. And not to say this is the same driving force for everybody, but just understanding the why, and I don't know that you can read, learn, seminar that. I think that's just you knowing thyself. And that's really, I think, what can drive all those other resources that you look into to figure out, how do I push my why? How do I make a calling out of my why? Because I can tell you, as hard as this work is for me to do, as much as, there is on the plate, I absolutely love it. I absolutely love each and every day that I get up and get to walk into that office and serve my community. And so that, I think, is more so to do with why I'm doing it than anything I've ever read. But always just being open. How can we do it better?
Yeah. And last question.
Yeah.
How important is mentorship? Or do you reach a certain level where it's not so important anymore?
No. I can tell you that at this level, it's more important than ever. The stakes are higher. The attention is much more. The pressure is much more. And so being able to rely on folks that have been there, done that, that you can trust to kind of be open and vulnerable with is tremendously important to have that. It's just somebody like, there are several people who I could call on speed dial to be like, hey, this just popped off over here.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? What are your suggestions on that? And so, yeah, I mean, absolutely, mentorship is extremely important throughout your entire career and beyond.
Well, Dalia, I have to say, I've been taking some notes and I've learned so much just in this short time that we've been chatting. I'm gonna close out because I know you're a busy woman, but I wanted to just, if you had anything else that you wanted to share, just to close out, we're happy to hear it. We could talk to you all day. We know we can't talk to you all day, but we could if we had the opportunity. Anything else you want to share with our listeners, our viewers, about leadership, or just about anything that you think, would be helpful?
Yeah. So number one, thank you so much for this opportunity, for those that stuck with it to hear me go on and on about this stuff. But I do appreciate this opportunity. I appreciate this connection, this community that we have in GAWL. I think that it's extremely, extremely important, especially for our local community here. But what I would say is my mantra a lot of times is to just have faith in the failures. For those that know my journey to this seat, knowing that it was a 10-year journey, and knowing that every time I was told no, that I grew more to be able to better serve my community. And then the other part is be bold. What's there to lose? Live boldly. And so that would be my sound bites to offer to those as we close out today. You're never going to get another shot at today, so you might as well live boldly.
Never going to get another shot at today. I love it. Servant leadership, understanding your why, ladies, making sure that if you're in a leadership position, it doesn't hurt to get input from people. Mentorship is essential. Like, I could go on and on and on.
And don't wait for a title to lead. You can lead in whatever you do.
Oh, that's big. Don't wait for a title to lead. I think that should be the title of your book, Madam District Attorney. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for making the time. I know you've got a ton of things on your plate. And for those who don't know, District Attorney Racine is a very, very strong supporter of our local chapter. We can always count on her for whatever it is that we may need, and we really, really appreciate that. And I'm going to close out now, but I will say this. If you are interested in hearing more interviews like this, we are on Spotify. You just go to She's Got GAWL on Spotify, and you can access all the podcasts, upcoming and previous. And then we also have a YouTube channel as well, where you can get the video and the audio. And with that, good night, everybody. Thank you so much, District Attorney Racine. We have enjoyed chatting with you.
Thank you.
And we'll see everybody next time.
Bye.